If you are of European descent, somewhere in your ancestry there is a migration that changed how you look more than any other single event in your family's history. It happened roughly 9,000 years ago. The people who made it walked out of what is now Western Turkey, crossed into Greece, and kept moving, northward, westward, generation after generation, until their descendants had spread across an entire continent. They brought wheat, they brought cattle, they brought a way of living that would transform Europe beyond recognition. And in their genomes, they carried something else, the genetic variants for lighter skin that the people already living in Europe almost entirely lacked. Most people have never heard of them. Almost no one knows their name. And yet, without them, the pale complexion that the modern world associates with Northern Europe would not exist. In the highlands of what is now Western Turkey, now a woman is grinding grain between two flat stones. It is slow, physical work. Her arms ache with it, and the dust coats her hands and settles in the creases of her knuckles. The grain she is grinding is emmer wheat, and her family has been growing it for as long as anyone can remember. Not hunting it, not gathering it from wild stands, but planting it, tending it, protecting it from birds and deer and the unpredictable rain, and harvesting it in the dry heat of late summer. Yet this is how her people have eaten for generations. It is all she has ever known. She has dark hair and dark eyes. Her skin is intermediate, not as dark as the hunter-gatherers living to her west in the forests of Europe, but darker than the pale-skinned Northern Europeans who will eventually carry a fraction of her ancestry thousands of years from now. She is, by any modern measure, Mediterranean in her appearance, closer to a modern Turkish or Greek woman in her general complexion than to anything the popular imagination places in the deep European past. Her people's ancestry reaches back to the hunter-gatherers who lived in Anatolia before farming began. People who had been in this part of the world since the end of the last great ice age, developing a relationship with the plants and animals of this particular landscape over thousands of years. Farming did not arrive in Anatolia from outside. It developed here out of a long and deepening familiarity with wild grasses that eventually became something more deliberate, more managed, more dependent on human effort and human intention. What farming did to the diet was profound. The wild game and gathered plants that had sustained her ancestors delivered a wide range of nutrients, including the fat-soluble vitamin that the body synthesizes in skin and also absorbs from food. Now, grain delivers almost none of it. A diet built around wheat and barley and lentils is calorie-rich and sustaining in ways that matter enormously for a population trying to grow and settle, but it is nutritionally narrower than the hunter-gatherer diet it replaced. The body's need for what sunlight can provide becomes more acute when the food stops providing it. In Anatolia, at the latitudes where farming first developed, this is not yet a crisis. The sun is strong enough, the UV levels high enough that even relatively dark skin can synthesize enough vitamin D to keep the body functioning. The selective pressure for lighter skin exists, but is not yet overwhelming. What matters is that the genetic variants for lighter skin, the mutations at the SLC24A5 locus that reduce melanin production and allow more UV penetration, are already present in this population, already circulating at meaningful frequency, and already being quietly shaped by a pressure that will become much stronger as the people carrying them move north. The village she lives in is small. A few dozen families, mud brick houses arranged around shared spaces, animals penned at the edges, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs rooting in the refuse at the perimeter. The smell of the place is thick with all of it. Grain dust, animal dung, cooking smoke. The particular warmth of a settlement where many bodies live close together in a way that no hunter-gatherer band ever quite does. Density is new. Permanence is new. Staying in one place long enough to watch your children grow up in the same house you were born in, that is new. The density brings things the hunter-gatherers to the west have never had to face. Disease moves easily through settled populations, through shared water, shared animals, shared air in close quarters. The domesticated animals carry pathogens that jump to humans with a frequency that would be impossible in a more dispersed, mobile way of life. The people in these villages are developing immunities, slowly and painfully, to a disease environment that farming itself has created. These immunities will matter enormously when their descendants eventually encounter people who have never lived this way. But that is far ahead. For now, the village is full and the harvest is in, and the grinding goes on through the morning. The woman's daughter sits nearby, watching, already learning the motion of it. The weight of the upper stone, the angle of the wrist, the rhythm that makes the work sustainable across an hour, a morning, a lifetime. Knowledge passes this way, hand to hand and eye to eye, as it always has. To the west, the forests of Europe stretch unbroken from the Aegean coast to the Atlantic. They are full of people, dark-skinned, pale-eyed in many cases, hunting red deer and fishing the rivers and working the coastal middens with a thoroughness built up over 40,000 years. Those people do not know that the village exists. The village does not know about them either, not yet. The distance between them is enormous, measured in weeks of walking through terrain that neither population has reason to cross. But population pressure does not wait for reason. In a farming village, more children survive infancy than in a hunter-gatherer band because the food supply is more predictable and the caloric surplus is larger. More children surviving means more mouths to feed, which means more land needed, which means moving, clearing the next valley, planting the next hillside, pushing the boundary of the known world a little further with each generation. The expansion is not planned. It is the natural arithmetic of a way of life that produces more people than it can sustain in a fixed space. The first moves are short. A family group establishing a new settlement a day's walk from the parent village. Then another family, another day's walk. The frontier moves by increments, each increment small enough to feel like nothing, the accumulation across generations enormous. The forests to the west are being approached, decade by decade, in from a direction their inhabitants cannot see and have no reason to expect. The woman grinding grain will not live to see Europe. Her children will not, nor their children. But the movement her way of life has set in motion will reach the Aegean coast within her great-grandchildren's lifetime, and the Balkans after that, and the Danube after that, and eventually, over thousands of years of slow and steady expansion, the Atlantic. And everywhere it goes, it will carry in the genomes of the people, making it the quiet genetic legacy of this village, including the variants for lighter skin that are already in the bodies of these dark-haired, dark-eyed, intermediate complexion people beginning their long journey north. She does not know any of this. She knows the grain and the stones and the particular quality of the light in the valley in the hour before the heat of the day becomes unbearable. She knows her daughter's face and the rhythm of the work and the smell of bread baking in the communal oven at the edge of the settlement. She is completely, entirely of her world, a world that is, without her knowledge or intention, about to change everything. The expansion is coming. It has already begun. A family group leaves the village before the heat of summer makes the journey impossible. The father carries seed grain wrapped in hide, emmer wheat and einkorn, carefully selected from the previous harvest, the best heads set aside through the winter for exactly this. The mother drives 2 goats ahead of her on a rope. Their older children carry tools, a clay pot, dried meat, the practical weight of a life being moved from one place to another. They are not fleeing anything. They are doing what farming families do when the land around the village has been worked long enough that a new valley, a day's walk further west, now looks more promising than what is behind them. This is how the expansion moves. Not as an army, not as an organized wave of conquest, but as the accumulated arithmetic of families making sensible decisions. A village grows until its surrounding fields cannot feed everyone comfortably. Some families move on, clear new ground, establish a daughter settlement. That settlement grows, and some of its families move on in turn. Each move is small. Each generation pushes the frontier a little further. Across centuries, the distance covered is enormous. By around 7000 BCE, farming communities are established in northwestern Anatolia, pressing against the Aegean coast. The sea in front of them is not a barrier. These people have been crossing open water to reach islands for generations, carrying animals and seed grain in boats sturdy enough to handle the Aegean in calm conditions. Crete has farmers by around 7000 BCE. Cyprus before that. The sea routes are older than the land routes into Europe, and they run ahead of the main migration, seeding islands and coastal footholds before the interior is touched. The land route enters Europe through the Balkans. Families crossing the narrow water between Anatolia and Thrace find themselves in a landscape that is, in its broad outlines, familiar. River valleys, mixed woodland, grazing ground that looks workable. They settle, clear, plant, multiply. Within a few generations, the daughter settlements are pushing northward and westward, up the valleys of Thrace and into the broader basin of the lower Danube. By around 6500 BCE, farming villages are established in Greece and the southern Balkans. The Danube lies ahead like a highway running straight into the heart of the continent. The people already living in these valleys watch the newcomers arrive. The dark-skinned, the pale-eyed hunter-gatherers of Europe have been working this landscape for 40,000 years. They know every river crossing, every seasonal migration route, every productive stretch of riverbank. What they are seeing, cleared ground, penned animals, the smell of a permanent settlement, people who do not move with the seasons but stay, is unlike anything in their experience. There is no framework in their world for what farming is or what it means. What they can see is that these people are different, and there are more of them every year. Contact at the frontier is not uniformly violent. The genetic evidence shows small amounts of hunter-gatherer ancestry entering the early farming populations in some regions, enough to indicate that meetings happened, that some individuals crossed from one world to the other, that the boundary was permeable in both directions, at least for a time. But the direction of the demographic pressure is entirely one way. Farming populations grow faster. A farming village on good ground produces more surviving children per generation than a hunter-gatherer band covering the same area. The numbers accumulate across generations in only one direction. The Danube carries the expansion deep into Central Europe. The linear pottery culture, named for the distinctive incised decoration on their ceramics, moves up the river system from around 5500 BCE, been establishing farming villages across what is now Hungary, Austria, Germany, and eventually the lowlands of northern France and the Low Countries. The pace is fast by prehistoric standards. The distance from the Balkans to the Atlantic coast, covered over roughly 2,000 years, works out to something like a kilometer a year on average. In practice, it moves in bursts, racing across flat river valleys and slowing in the uplands between them. Simultaneously, the Mediterranean route is running west along the coastline. Farmers in boats following the northern shore of the Mediterranean, carrying their package of domesticated plants and animals from one coastal landing to the next. They reach the Italian peninsula, then Iberia, then push northward up the Atlantic coast from around 5500 BCE onward. The cardial ware culture, identified by pottery decorated with the edge of a cockle shell, marks their presence from Spain to France to eventually the British Isles. Two streams of the same expansion converging on Western Europe from different directions. What the expanding farmers look like is specific and consistent. Dark hair, brown eyes, and skin that is lighter than the Western hunter-gatherers they are displacing. The SLC24A5 skin lightening variant is present at high frequency in these populations, a genetic legacy of ancestors who had been farming grain in Anatolia long enough for the dietary pressure to begin shifting their complexion. But they are not pale in any modern Northern European sense. They are, in their general appearance, closer to modern people from the Eastern Mediterranean, Greek, Turkish, Sardinian, than to the pale-skinned Northern Europeans their descendants will eventually help produce. Their animals transform the landscape ahead of them. Cattle need grazing ground. Forest has to go to provide it. Goats strip regenerating woodland with an efficiency that prevents recovery. Fire is used deliberately to open ground, to push back the tree line, to create the cleared fields that the grain requires. A landscape that has been forest for 10,000 years, home to the same families of hunter-gatherers across dozens of generations, is being remade within a few human lifetimes. The light that comes through the canopy where the trees have been felled is a different kind of light entirely. The hunter-gatherers retreat ahead of the clearance, not in any organized way, but as the practical consequence of the hunting ground shrinking, the game thinning, the known world becoming less known season by season. Yet in some regions they absorb small amounts of farmer ancestry and continue. In others, they diminish and eventually disappear from the genetic record entirely. In the Balkans, the replacement of the local hunter-gatherer gene pool is nearly total. Around 98% of the pre-farming ancestry gone within a few generations of the farmer's arrival. The speed of it is startling even in the archaeological record. The family that left the Anatolian village with their seed grain and their goats did not know any of this. They knew the valley ahead looked workable, and the one behind them was already crowded. That was enough. Their grandchildren's grandchildren are farming the banks of the Danube. Their descendants' will eventually stand on the Atlantic coast of France, looking out at the ocean, with a continent cleared and planted behind them that was, when their ancestors first crossed into Europe, entirely someone else's world. The expansion is not finished. It will not be finished for another 2,000 years. But by 5,500 BCE, it has already transformed the genetic and physical landscape of southeastern Europe beyond recognition, and its leading edge is moving westward through the river valleys of Central Europe, with a momentum that nothing in its path has the demographic weight to stop. The hunters are still out there, somewhere in the remaining forest, but the forest is getting smaller every generation, and there are fewer hunters in it every time. A woman in a Neolithic village in what is now central Hungary is nursing an infant in the second year of its life. The child is healthy, growing, alert, feeding well. But the winter has been long, the stores of grain are running low, and the meals have been thin for weeks. There is no fish. There has been no hunting worth speaking of. The cattle are kept for milk and breeding, too valuable to slaughter. What there is grain, emmer wheat ground into a porridge that fills the stomach and delivers calories but not much else. The child is getting what it needs to survive, but only barely. Her great-grandmother ate differently. Her great-grandmother's people moved with the seasons, followed the deer and the fish runs, ate liver and marrow and oily river fish through the winter months. They were rarely hungry in the way that hunger settles into a farming village at the end of a hard winter. The deep, specific hunger of a body running short of things that food alone is not providing. The shift from that diet to this one happened over generations, too slowly for anyone to mark it. But the body keeps its own account. The thing the child's body is running short of is not calories. It is vitamin D. Not an abstraction, a physical reality that shows up in bones that bend slightly underweight, in muscles that tire faster than they should, in an immune system that is slower to respond than it once was. In the forest to the west, the hunter-gatherer bands still eating fish and deer and organ meat are not experiencing this. Their diet is delivering through food what this child's body is now being asked to make from sunlight alone. And the sunlight in a Central European winter. Falling low and thin through months of overcast sky is nowhere near enough. Lighter skin helps. This is the mechanism that has been building since the first farmers moved north of Anatolia, and it is now, in these Neolithic villages spreading across the river valleys of Central Europe, becoming urgent. Lighter skin allows more ultraviolet radiation to penetrate the outer layers of the epidermis, where the chemistry that converts sunlight into vitamin D takes place. So darker skin, rich in melanin, evolved to protect against the fierce UV of lower latitudes, blocks too much of what little northern sunlight there is. In the forests, among hunter-gatherers eating well, this was manageable. In the grain villages, it is becoming a matter of survival. The farmers arriving in Europe carry a genetic variant that addresses exactly this problem. It sits in a gene called SLC24A5, and it reduces melanin production in the skin, shifting the complexion toward lighter tones that let more UV through, that synthesize more vitamin D from weaker sunlight. The variant did not originate in Europe. It arose somewhere in the Middle East, perhaps 25,000 years ago, and spread through the populations of Western Asia over the millennia that followed. By the time the Anatolian farmers begin moving into Europe, it is already near universal in their genome. They carry it the way they carry their seed grain, as part of who they are, without knowing what it does or why. In Anatolia, at the latitudes where farming began, the variant is useful but not critical. The sun is stronger there, the UV levels higher, and even intermediate skin can synthesize enough vitamin D to keep a body healthy through the winter. The pressure exists, but it is not overwhelming. Move those same people, or their descendants, 500 kilometers north, into the river valleys of Central Europe, and everything changes. The UV levels drop, the winters lengthen. The grain diet strips away the dietary buffer that once made skin-based synthesis a secondary concern. The variant that was mildly advantageous in Anatolia becomes strongly advantageous here, and strongly advantageous variants spread fast. They spread through children. A child born with slightly lighter skin in a Neolithic farming village in Central Europe is marginally better at synthesizing vitamin D from the pale winter sun than a darker-skinned sibling. Marginally better means slightly healthier bones, slightly stronger immunity, slightly better survival through the hungry end of winter months when the grain stores are running out. Over generations, across dozens of generations, those marginal differences accumulate. The lighter-skinned children survive at fractionally higher rates, reproduce at fractionally higher rates, and the variant that produced them rises in frequency through the population the way any strongly selected trait does. Steadily, relentlessly, across centuries. This is not fast on a human timescale. No individual lives long enough to see the population change, but it is fast on an evolutionary timescale. Dramatically, unusually fast. The ancient DNA record shows the SLC24A5 variant rising in frequency across European farming populations over the course of a few thousand years, continuing to increase even after the farming populations mix with the hunter-gatherer populations around them, even after subsequent migrations bring new ancestry from the steppe. The selection pressure is strong enough to keep driving the variant upward through every new admixture event, every population merger, every generation of new children born into villages that are still, winter after winter, eating grain and not enough of anything else. The woman nursing her infant in the Hungarian village does not know any of this. She knows the child needs feeding and the grain stores are low and the spring cannot come quickly enough. What she cannot know is that somewhere in the child's genome, inherited from ancestors who walked out of Anatolia carrying it without knowing what it was, sits the variant that is, slowly and across generations, she will never see, lightening the complexion of everyone who comes after her. The child will survive this winter. Its children will be slightly lighter than it was, its grandchildren slightly lighter still. The The hunter-gatherers in the remaining forests to the west do not have this variant, or have it only rarely, acquired through occasional contact with the expanding farming populations. Their diet still makes it less urgent. The fish runs still come, the deer are still there, the organ meat is still part of the seasonal round. But the forests are shrinking, the hunting grounds are contracting, and the farming villages are multiplying. The world that made dark skin workable at northern latitudes is disappearing, one cleared field at a time. What is happening in these villages, in this period, is the beginning of the physical transformation of Europe. Not the end of it. The full, modern, northern European appearance requires more ingredients, arriving later from different directions. But the most important single step in that transformation is happening here, in the bodies of children eating grain through long winters in river valley villages stretching from the Balkans to the Rhine. The light is coming, literally and genetically, to a continent that has been dark for 40,000 years. It is coming because the food changed, not because the climate changed, not because northern latitudes somehow instructed the genome to lighten after tens of thousands of years of failing to do so, but because the diet changed, because the fish and the meat and the marrow and the liver gave way to grain, and the body, faced with a winter it could no longer eat its way through, began the slow work of letting more light in. The child at the breast will grow up in a world that looks, from the outside, identical to the one its parents inhabited. The same village, the same fields, the same long winters. But something inside it is different and will be different in its children, and in their children, and in every generation of farmers spreading westward and northward across a continent that is, one body at a time, beginning to change. The grain did this, not the cold. The grain. A man stands at the edge of a clearing he has spent 3 weeks making. Behind him, the stumps of trees that were standing when his grandfather was born. Ahead, raw earth, pale and exposed, already broken into furrows by the antler picks his family have been working since the trees came down. But the soil here is good. He can feel it in how it turns, dark and loamy, holding moisture without sitting wet. His cattle are tethered at the tree line. His children are pulling the last roots from the ground before planting begins. This valley, in what will one day be southern Germany, has been forest since before anyone's memory reaches. It will not be forest again. The expansion that left Anatolia 3,000 years earlier has reached the heart of the continent. The river valleys of Central Europe, the Danube and its tributaries, the Rhine, the Elbe, have become farming country within a few centuries of the first settlers arriving. The clearings are not isolated. They multiply, one daughter settlement at a time, until the forest between them is no longer a continuous world, but a diminishing one, cut through by the movement of people and animals between villages that are growing larger and more established with every generation. Now, the man clearing the valley has dark hair and brown eyes. His skin is intermediate, lighter than the hunter-gatherers who worked this same river for 40,000 years before him, carrying in his genome the variants for lighter skin that his Anatolian ancestors brought west under slow but persistent selection pressure in every generation that eats grain through a northern winter. He is not pale by any modern northern European standard. He is, in his general appearance, something like a modern Greek or Sardinian. Mediterranean in complexion, southern in ancestry, entirely out of place in the cold river valley where he is building his life. To the north, beyond the ranges of hills that bracket the valley, the forests are still largely intact and still full of hunter-gatherers. They have been watching the clearings appear on the southern horizon for 2 generations now. The smoke from burning, the sound of axes, the smell of cattle on winds coming from the wrong direction. Some of them have come close enough to trade. A hunter moving through the forest at the margins of the farming frontier encounters people who have things he has never seen. Polished stone axes, ceramic pots, the strange and unpredictable cattle that watch him with flat, incurious eyes. He trades pelts, maybe, dried meat. He watches and leaves. His world is still his world, but not for much longer. The frontier moves north and west, following the logic of population pressure that does not pause for the preferences of the people in its path. By around 5000 BCE, the farming villages have pushed into what is now France and the Low Countries. The Mediterranean coastal route has been running simultaneously along the northern shore of the inland sea, seeding coastal settlements from Italy to Iberia, turning northward up the Atlantic facade. Two streams of the same expansion, and moving at different speeds through different landscapes, converging on the western edge of the continent. Where the two streams meet, in southern France, in the river valleys west of the Rhine, something different happens. The genetic evidence from this region shows far more mixing between the arriving farmers and the local hunter-gatherers than anywhere else in Europe. In Central Europe, the replacement was nearly total. The hunter-gatherer contribution to the farming gene pool barely measurable. In the south of France, the numbers are strikingly different. Nearly a third of the ancestry in some early farming communities here traces back to the local hunter-gatherers they encountered. In one individual from the Provençal coast, the hunter-gatherer contribution is over half. The frontier here was not a wall, it was a meeting place for at least a few generations. What does mixing look like in practice? It's in the lives of actual people. A farming woman whose parents came from a village further east takes a hunter-gatherer man as a partner, or the reverse. A hunter-gatherer family settles at the edge of a farming community, trades labor for food through a hard winter, stays. A child grows up knowing both worlds, the forest routes her father walked and the fields her mother planted, and her children know only the fields. The mixing is not policy or program. It is the ordinary consequence of people living close to each other across years and decades, doing what people have always done. The children of that mixing carry something new in their genomes, the pale eye variants from the hunter-gatherer lineage entering the farming gene pool, the lighter skin variants from the farming lineage entering children who might otherwise have carried less of them. In the bodies of the mixed ancestry children growing up in these frontier communities, notice the pieces of the eventual Northern European appearance are beginning for the first time to sit in the same genome together. Not yet in their final configuration, not yet at the frequencies that will eventually define a population, but present, circulating, spreading. The expansion reaches Scandinavia from the south around 4000 BCE, carried by the funnel beaker culture, people of predominantly Anatolian farmer ancestry who have been moving northward through the continent for centuries. The landscape they enter is harsh and the growing season short, but the river valleys of southern Scandinavia are workable and the soils, once cleared, are productive. Within a few generations, the farming frontier has reached the Baltic coast. The hunter-gatherers of the Scandinavian interior, the pitted ware culture, persist on the coast, fishing and hunting seal for another 1,000 years alongside the farmers without meaningfully mixing with them. Two ways of life, side by side and barely touching. Meanwhile, the Atlantic coastal communities are building. Along the western edge of the continent, from Iberia to Brittany to Ireland and eventually Britain, the farming populations arriving by sea are establishing something that will leave marks on the landscape for the rest of human history. The first megalithic monuments are going up. Great stone structures that require coordinated labor on a scale that only settled, surplus-producing communities can sustain. The people building them are the descendants of Anatolian farmers, dark-haired and brown-eyed, their skin somewhere between the Mediterranean complexion of their ancestors and the lighter tone that the northern latitude and the grain diet are slowly, generation by generation, pulling them toward. Across the whole of Europe, the genetic landscape is transforming. The Anatolian farmer ancestry is rising everywhere that farming has reached, diluting, displacing, sometimes absorbing the hunter-gatherer ancestry that preceded it. The continent that was, 6,000 years ago, entirely the domain of dark-skinned, pale-eyed Western hunter-gatherers, is now a patchwork of farming communities carrying a different genome, a different complexion, a different relationship to the land. The transformation is not complete. The steppe people have not yet arrived, but the first and most consequential migration is largely done. And Europe will never look the same again. The man who cleared the valley in southern Germany does not live to see any of this. He knows his fields and his cattle and the particular quality of the soil in the valley he chose. His children will know the same valley. Their children will build a house on the same ground, and their children after that. The permanent claim on the land that farming makes, the idea that this piece of earth is ours, and that we belong to it and it to us, is one of the things his people brought with them from Anatolia, along with the grain and the cattle and the lighter skin. It will shape everything that comes after him for the rest of the history of the continent. The forest is still out there, somewhere beyond the hills, but the people who knew it the way water knows a riverbed are fewer every generation, their world smaller, their children sometimes choosing the fields over the trees. The old world is not gone yet, but it is going. And across the whole length and breadth of a continent that is clearing and planting and building for the first time in its history, the genomes of a new European population are assembling themselves. Darker than the people who will eventually come, lighter than the people who were here before, somewhere in between, on their way to something that has not yet been invented. The third wave is still 1,000 years away, but the ground for it is being prepared, one cleared valley at a time. The farmers are everywhere now. The light is coming with them. Slowly, invisibly, one generation at a time, it is coming. On a limestone plateau on a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean, a group of people are moving stones that weigh more than anything any of them has ever lifted alone. The stones are local, coralline limestone, dense and hard, quarried from outcrops a short distance away and dragged here on sledges and rollers over days and weeks of coordinated effort. The structure they are building will stand for 5,000 years. They do not know that. They know the shape it is meant to take, the orientation it must have to catch the rising sun on the morning of the equinox, the particular quality of the light that will fall through the entrance when the alignment is right. These things have been planned. The knowledge of how to do this has been passed through the people responsible for it across more than one generation. The temples of Malta, the Gantija complex on the island of Gozo, begun around 3600 BCE, are among the oldest freestanding stone buildings in the world. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids of Egypt. The people who built them were the descendants of Anatolian farmers who had reached Malta by boat several thousand years earlier, cleared its limestone hillsides, it grazed their cattle and sheep on its thin soil, and developed, in the particular isolation of island life, something that went far beyond simple subsistence. They were dark-haired, brown-eyed, intermediate in complexion, Mediterranean in every physical sense. And they were building structures of a sophistication that Europe would not see again for a very long time. Along the Atlantic coast of the continent, a different expression of the same impulse is underway. The megalithic tradition, the construction of large stone monuments for collective burial and ceremony, begins appearing along the Atlantic facade from around 4,500 BCE, Brittany first, then Iberia, then Ireland, then Britain. The monuments take different forms in different places: passage tombs, gallery graves, standing stones arranged in rows and circles. What they share is the scale, the permanence, and the investment of coordinated communal labor that only a settled, a surplus-producing farming society can sustain. In Ireland, on a bend of the River Boyne, the people of the Bruna Boyne complex are building what will become Newgrange. A passage tomb begun around 3200 BCE. Its long stone corridor aligned so precisely that on the morning of the winter solstice, a shaft of sunlight penetrates the full length of the passage and illuminates the burial chamber at its heart for exactly 17 minutes. Someone designed this. Someone understood the geometry of the sun's movement through the sky well enough to build the calculation into the stone before the first course was laid. The monument was not an accident of alignment. It was an intention. The people buried inside Newgrange are kin. The ancient DNA from megalithic burials across Atlantic Europe confirms what the monuments themselves suggest. These structures were built by communities organized around family descent. The bones of fathers and sons and grandsons placed together in the same chamber across generations, the monument serving as the physical expression of a lineage's claim to the land above it. You belong here because your ancestors are here. The burial chamber is the title deed, written in stone and bone. This is a fundamentally different relationship with the land than anything the hunter-gatherers who preceded these people ever had. A hunter-gatherer band's claim to a territory is carried in living memory, in the knowledge of where the deer crossed the river, in the stories told around the fire about the places their grandparents camped. When the people who hold that memory are gone, the claim is gone. A stone monument endures. It says, to anyone who comes after, these people were here, and this ground is theirs, and the proof is too heavy to move. In the south of England, on the chalk downland of Wiltshire, the first phase of Stonehenge is going up around 3000 BCE. A circular earthwork and ditch enclosing a ring of large timber posts, the bones of the dead deposited in the chalk around the perimeter. The people building it are of predominantly Anatolian farmer ancestry, the descendants of the families who crossed the Channel from northern France several centuries earlier and cleared the downland of its forest. They are building a monument to their dead in a landscape they have made their own, using the coordinated labor of communities spread across a wide area who come together for the work and the ceremony, and then disperse again to their farms. Across the continent, the Neolithic world at its height is a landscape of cleared fields and permanent settlements connected by the invisible threads of family obligation, trade, and shared ceremony. Objects move along these threads, particular types of polished stone axe, pottery and recognized styles. The raw materials for tools and ornament carried hundreds of kilometers from their sources. The people carrying them are moving through a Europe that has been transformed in the space of 3,000 years, from continuous forest to a farming landscape that would be recognizable in its broad outlines to anyone alive today. What these people look like at this moment is specific and consistent. Dark hair, brown eyes, and skin that is lighter than the Western hunter-gatherers they or their ancestors displaced. The skin lightening variants from Anatolia present in their genomes and under continued selection pressure in every grain farming community at every northern latitude. But they are not pale, not by modern northern European standards. The full lightening is not complete. The steppe ancestry that will drive the final transformation has not yet arrived. These people are somewhere in between. A transitional complexion in a transitional world, partway along a journey whose destination they cannot see. On the island of Malta, the temple builders are carrying fat-burning lamps into the stone corridors to tend the bones of their ancestors. In Ireland, the equinox sun is being watched from the entrance of a passage tomb that took generations to build. On the chalk downlands of England, their farmers are dragging posts into holes in the ground that will one day be replaced by stones. These are the people who introduced lighter skin to Europe. This is what they made with their surplus and their permanence and their deep monument-building conviction that the dead should be remembered in stone. The steppe people are coming. They are still far away on the grasslands of Russia and Ukraine, moving with their herds, not yet turned toward the west. But the world they will enter when they arrive is already radically different from the one the hunter-gatherers inhabited. It is a world of fields and monuments and kin-structured communities built around the principle that the land is owned and the ownership must be declared. The Neolithic farmers built that world. It will be taken from them. But what they built will outlast the taking by 5,000 years. The stones at Guntija are still standing. The passage at Newgrange still catches the winter solstice sunrise. Stonehenge is still there on its chalk ridge, stripped of its people and its meaning and most of its original structure, but still there, the durable remainder of a world made by dark-haired, intermediate-skinned farming people who came from Anatolia and built Europe into something permanent, and then were replaced so thoroughly that almost no one today knows their name. On the southern coast of what is now France, in the years around 5,400 BCE, a woman lives in a farming community that has been established here for less than a generation. She plants grain in the cleared ground above the coastal shelf. She keeps goats. She grinds flour on a flat stone in the way her mother taught her and her mother's mother before that. But her father was not a farmer. Her father was one of the dark-skinned, pale-eyed people who had worked this coastline for thousands of years before the first farming family arrived. She carries both worlds in her body. More than half of her ancestry, traceable in her bones, runs back to the hunter-gatherers her mother's people encountered when they first came to this shore. She is not unusual here at this particular frontier. The coast of southern France and the inland valleys behind it are the place where the two streams of the Neolithic expansion, the Danube corridor from the northeast and the Mediterranean coastal route from the southeast, converge. One and where the hunter-gatherers who have been living between them have been in contact with farming communities longer than anywhere else in Western Europe. The mixing here is deeper than anywhere else. It shows in the bones, and it shows in the faces of the children growing up at the edge of the cleared fields. Further east, in the gorges of the Danube, where the river cuts through the mountains between modern Romania and Serbia, a different kind of meeting is playing out. At Lepenski Vir, a settlement of hunter-gatherers built into the riverbank above the Danube rapids, the people who have been fishing these waters for centuries are living in close proximity to the farming villages spreading westward from the Balkans. The architecture here is neither fully hunter-gatherer nor fully Neolithic. There are trapezoidal houses with stone hearths. There are fish bones and the bones of domesticated cattle in the same refuse deposits. Yet there are burials that mix the traditions of both worlds, bodies positioned in ways that come from neither ancestry alone. In Central Europe, none of this is happening. The linear pottery farmers moving up the Danube from the southeast are replacing the hunter-gatherers with a thoroughness that leaves almost no genetic trace of mixing. In Bavaria, in the Rhine Valley, in the Loess plains of northern Germany, then the hunter-gatherer ancestry in the farming populations is close to zero. So close that for years the question was whether there had been any contact at all. The answer, when it finally came from the ancient DNA, was barely. The expansion through Central Europe was less a meeting of worlds than a displacement. The contrast between the two regions is real and striking. The frontier in Central Europe appears to have been a hard edge, two populations occupying adjacent territories, and trading occasionally at the margins, but not mixing. The frontier in southern France was something softer, a zone of contact that lasted for generations, where the same individuals carried both ancestries in meaningful proportions, where a woman could have a farmer mother and a hunter-gatherer father and live in a farming village, and be neither fully of one world nor fully of the other. What happened at these frontier zones in human terms is not preserved in the archaeological record with any precision. The genetic evidence tells you that mixing occurred, and roughly when and in what proportions. It does not tell you whether it was peaceful or coerced, willing or unwilling, celebrated or mourned. Elsewhere in the LBK world, the great horizon of linear pottery farming culture stretching across Central Europe, There is evidence of massacre sites and mass graves, so communities wiped out in episodes of violence that suggest the frontier was not always negotiated peacefully. The mixing and the violence coexisted. They were both part of the same long, uneven encounter between two ways of living. A child born on the Provençal coast to a farming mother and a hunter-gatherer father grows up knowing two ways of reading the same landscape. Her mother's people see the cleared ground above the coast as fields, as worked land, productive land, a land with a claim attached to it. Her father's people see the same ground as part of a territory they have moved through seasonally for longer than memory reaches. Not owned, not claimed, not something that can be fenced or planted without changing what it is. The child carries both ways of seeing and probably struggles to reconcile them in ways that neither parent can fully understand. In her genome, the two lineages sit side by side. The skin lightening variant from her mother's Anatolian ancestry is present. The pale eye variant from her father's hunter-gatherer ancestry is present. In her children, and in the children of other mixed individuals at this frontier, the pieces of the eventual Northern European appearance are circulating together for the first time, not yet assembled into the combination that will eventually define the region, not yet at the frequencies that characterize a whole population, but present, mixed, and beginning their long process of sorting and selection across the generations ahead. The hunter-gatherers at the margins are not passive in this process. Some of them are acquiring farming practices, keeping a few animals, planting small gardens, without fully abandoning the mobile life that has sustained their people for 40,000 years. Some farming communities are adopting hunting strategies and wild food sources from the hunter-gatherers around them. We're incorporating local knowledge into a way of life that is still fundamentally agricultural, but that is learning to read a specific landscape from people who have known it far longer. The frontier is porous in both directions for a time, but only for a time. The arithmetic of population pressure does not pause for cultural exchange. Farming communities grow faster than hunter-gatherer bands. They can sustain more people on a given area of land, now, which means they can outcompete for territory without ever raising a weapon. The hunter-gatherers at the margin, even the ones with mixed ancestry, even the ones who have been farming for a generation, are contracting. Their territory is smaller every decade. Their numbers are declining relative to the farming population around them. The mixing is real, but it is a mixing on the way to replacement, not a stable equilibrium between two equal worlds. By around 3,500 BCE, the mixing at the margins is largely over. The hunter-gatherer populations of Western Europe have been absorbed into the farming gene pool, some more thoroughly than others, most leaving only a fraction of their ancestry in the communities that outlast them. The pale eye variants they carried are now circulating in farming populations that previously lacked them. The skin lightening variants the farmers carried have spread into the mixed communities that formed at the frontier. Europe's genome is becoming more unified, more intermediate, more complex than either of its two source populations alone. The woman on the Provençal coast is already part of that synthesis. She does not know it. She knows the coast and the fields and the two languages she grew up hearing, her mother's and her father's, neither of them quite the language she thinks in, both of them necessary for navigating the world she inhabits. She is the product of two worlds and the ancestor of neither. Not exactly. She is something new, the beginning of a European genome that will keep changing, keep absorbing new streams, keep producing new faces for another 3,000 years before anything like the modern Northern European appearance finally consolidates. On a small island off the southwestern coast of Italy, a population of farmers has been living in relative isolation for 5,000 years. Their ancestors arrived from the mainland during the Neolithic expansion, cleared the limestone hillsides, built their settlements, buried their dead. The steppe migrations that will eventually transform the genetic landscape of the continent reach Sardinia only weekly, late, and in small amounts. The people living there today carry more of the original Anatolian farmer ancestry than almost any other population in Europe, somewhere between 65 and 80%, depending on where on the island you look. They are, in a very real sense, they're the closest living relatives of the people who brought lighter skin to Europe. They do not look like pale northern Europeans. They look like Mediterranean people, dark-haired, dark-eyed, olive to intermediate in complexion. And this is exactly what the genetics predicts. The Anatolian farmers were not pale. They were intermediate, lighter than the hunter-gatherers they displaced, darker than the modern northern Europeans their descendants helped produce. The Sardinians, so carrying more of that original ancestry than anyone else on the continent, wear it in their faces every day. The man buried in the Alps around 3300 BCE, known today as Ötzi, is of almost pure early European farmer ancestry. His genome places him squarely in the Anatolian farmer lineage, the same stream that spread across Europe from the Balkans over the preceding 3,000 years. And his skin, red from the pigmentation variants in his DNA, was darker than that of modern southern Italians. A man of predominantly Anatolian farmer ancestry, living in the mountains of what is now northern Italy, with darker skin than the people who live there today. The lightening that his ancestors set in motion was still, in his lifetime, incomplete. This is the nature of the legacy. The Anatolian farmers introduced the genetic variants for lighter skin into Europe. They spread those variants across the continent through the sheer demographic force of an expanding farming population. They subjected those variants to the selection pressure of a grain-based diet at northern latitudes, driving them upward in frequency across every generation that spent another winter eating emmer wheat in a longhouse in Germany or France or Britain. They did more to change the appearance of Europe than any other single migration in the continent's history. And they did all of it while remaining, themselves, darker than the modern Northern European stereotype that their contribution helped create. The irony is complete. The traits most associated in the modern imagination with pale Northern European ancestry, the light skin, the specific complexion that Northern Europe is known for across the world, arrived in Europe primarily from the Middle East, from Anatolia, from farmers whose ancestry traced back to the same broad region that produced the ancient civilizations of the Near East, who were genetically closer to modern Turkish and Greek people than to the pale-skinned Northern Europeans whose appearance they made possible. The origin of European whiteness is, at its most fundamental level, a Middle Eastern story. Their ancestry is in every European alive today, in proportions that map almost exactly onto geography. In southern Europe, Italy, Spain, to Greece, the Mediterranean islands, the Anatolian farmer contribution to the modern genome runs between 60 and 80%. These are the populations that most closely resemble the original farmers in appearance: darker hair, darker eyes, intermediate to olive complexion. The farmer ancestry is the dominant layer, and it shows. Move north, and the proportions shift. In France and Germany and Britain, yet the Anatolian farmer contribution sits at around 40 to 50%, still substantial, still present in every individual, but diluted by the two other streams that arrived later. In Scandinavia, in the Baltic states, in Finland, the farmer ancestry drops further still, as low as 10 to 35% in some populations, overwhelmed by the steppe ancestry that swept through these regions in the Bronze Age. The pale-skinned, light-haired, blue-eyed Northern European that the modern imagination places at the center of the European story is, genetically, the population where the Anatolian farmer contribution is lowest. The specific genetic variants the farmers carried, SLC 24A5, above all, the single most important contributor to skin lightening in European populations, are now among the most common variants in the entire modern European gene pool. They are in the genome of almost every person of European descent alive today, And regardless of where in Europe their more recent ancestors came from. They arrived with the farmers, they spread with the farmers, and they were selected for in the bodies of every generation of grain-eating children who spent another hungry winter at a northern latitude, needing more from the pale winter sun than their darker skin could deliver. The woman grinding grain in the Anatolian village did not know what she was carrying. And the family crossing into the Balkans with their seed grain and their goats did not know what they were bringing. The children growing up in the first farming villages in Central Europe, eating their grain porridge through the cold months, did not know what was happening in their bodies. None of them knew. It happened across thousands of years and hundreds of generations, invisible to everyone living through it, visible only from the distance of the present day, looking back at the bones. What they left behind is in the faces of everyone of European descent, in the lightness of a complexion that would not exist without them, in the specific variants that sit in the genome and determine how much melanin the skin produces and how much UV radiation it lets through. The Anatolian farmers are the largest single contributor to European appearance, and almost nobody knows their name. Almost nobody has heard of them. The most consequential migration in the history of European appearance passed through and changed everything, and left almost no trace in the stories people tell about where they came from.